Welcome back, PetaPixel viewers. It is Chris Niccolls here, and today I've got an odd lens for you, even odder than the Tamron 35-150, because this is the brand new Tamron 17-50 f4. And no, not for APS-C like I assumed 2 or 3 times when I first heard the lens, but actually for full frame. So the 17-50 might seem like a bit of a weird focal length on full frame. Jordan loves these weird focal lengths. I'm a little bit more ambivalent, but you know, lenses like the Sony 20-70 f4 really blew me away. In fact, that's one of my favorite lenses of all time because it does cover that useful range where you don't have to carry a dedicated wide angle around. And this is a similar idea. I mean, this goes wider to 17 millimeters, so maybe I don't need to get a 17-28 or a 16-35 kind of lens. This would pair really nicely with a 35-150 or even more so like the 70-180 G2 with 2 lenses. I could have ultra wide all the way covered to a portrait telephoto and beyond, and so that's very handy, very versatile, and very easy to carry around. So yeah, it looks like I'm taking a picture of garbage, and I am, make no mistake, but really it's actually an artistic exploration of the color yellow. Okay, let's talk about handling on the new Tamron 17-50 f4. Now, it's a Tamron, and I say that because it follows the exact same style and design that we've seen on the other Tamrons. I like it. I mean, it still feels nice and solid, but more of a plastic housing, keeps the weight down, 460 grams, under half a plana. Classic 67mm filter thread. They don't seem to want to do anything else otherwise, but that's really nice because you have a bunch of Tamron lenses, your filters will match all across. One thing that I will say, we have a custom button here, and Tamron software is excellent. You can go and customize the direction of the manual focus, if it's linear or not. I mean, you can customize what this button does, but we have a complete lack of autofocus, manual focus switches, or any sort of controls for aperture, anything like that. It's just very simple, and I don't know, maybe call me an old silly but I just really appreciate having classic switches. You still do, of course, have the USB-C port here on the side so you can connect to the lens, update firmware, and use said software to program it. Otherwise, the hood is classic Tamron, very rudimentary, just basic and plastic, but they are well built and they are well sealed despite the overall plastic feel. So 2 of my favorite things are when an ultra-wide lens like this can also do really good close-up stuff to add the versatility for when I'm just out shooting about. The second thing that I really love is Budweiser. It really is the king of beers.
What?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought I would use this beer can to show the close-up capabilities of this lens. You can see here at 17 millimeters, we're actually very close physically, just under 6 centimeters of working distance. We're not getting great macro reproduction. 15 millimeters where this lens does a better job. We're getting more working distance and we're getting a tighter field of view. You can see the Budweiser is basically filling the frame. We're getting just over 1 to 4 life-size reproduction. It's not as close as I would love to have, but it does still aid in the versatility of this lens to do the occasional close-up. And no, we are not sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, but yes, if we could, we would. Now right here on the side, it's a VXD. That means Tamron's put their voice coil linear motors in here, and this is actually one of the faster lenses that I've tried that have the VXD. It's very snappy, great for street photography, which is what this lens is made for. I'd say it's even faster than an Angrier bike courier on their best fixie. So very responsive, very snappy. I like that. So the Christmas holiday season is one of my favorite times of year, and you might think, oh, it's the family, the get-togethers, the presents, if the kids have a great time, the magic of it all, but really it's because I can get bokeh tests right on the street with all of these Christmas lights that everyone puts up. Just go right on the street, get some colorful bokeh, beautiful. Anyways, why don't I actually talk about bokeh? So having a look here at example, specular highlights shooting wide open at f4, actually not much cat's eye in the corners, it's very well controlled. The bokeh is nice and round, does have some onion rings though, you can see that quite clearly here. A bit of a soap bubble effect. When we stop down the lens, we're still getting a fairly round shape, little polygonal, but overall it's the onion rings and the soap bubble effect that are going to give us kind of harsh looking specular highlights. The transition from in-focus to out-of-focus areas is fairly smooth. I wouldn't say that bokeh is this lens's strong point. So as you can see, we're getting some nice backlit situations, some pretty strong sunlight there, good for flare tests. So I've done a few here. Tamrons traditionally handle flare very well. This is no exception. You can see minimal loss of contrast. Even stop down, the ghosting is very well controlled. I don't find it that abrasive. It actually looks quite nice. So overall, shooting towards the sun, this lens has no problems. But, one thing I do want to test when I'm talking about landscapes is sunstars. So we got the sun, shoot, stop down here, and you can see the sunstars, unfortunately, not really amazing. Lots of points. We're not getting a lot of sharpness or definition in those points though. Again, sunstars aren't everything, but if that is something you like to do, this lens is giving you average results at best. So we took an opportunity to test the breathing performance on this 17 to 50 because otherwise it excels as a video lens. I mean, it's lightweight, doesn't shift a lot of point of balance as you zoom. It'd be really good on a gimbal, gives you that nice ultra wide look to a normal look. Jordan absolutely loves this kind of range when he's doing video work. But what about the breathing? Well, we did a test here, and as you can see, it's actually pretty good. I mean, there's a little bit of movement there. You see the field of view change slightly, but overall I'd say that performance is pretty decent. So this is a handy little video lens, especially when you consider just how much you can customize with the rings here using Tamron's excellent software. So let's talk about sharpness now on the 17 to 50 here. So going to our test chart shots, let's look again, center of the image at 17 millimeters, wide open at f4. You can see actually the detail in the center is quite nice, even wide open. Stopping down the lens to f8 improves that slightly, but I was already pretty happy with the performance. But now when we go to the corners at 17 mil, shooting again at f4, you can see it looks rough. I mean, we're just not getting any definition, kind of a blur going right into the corners. At 17 millimeters, stopping down to f8, things do improve, but they're still not great. So let's take a look at the other end of the spectrum, looking at 50 millimeters here. So in the center, shooting wide open f4, it's pretty sharp, good detail. We do notice an improvement when we go to f8 though in the center, shooting at 50 millimeters. When we look at the corners at 50 mil, shooting wide open at f4, it's still not great. I mean, it's pretty soft, but it's much better than 17 millimeters. When we stop down to f8, those corners really sharpen up. And so I will say that when you're shooting f8 at 50 millimeters, it's dramatically better performance from the center to the corners than you get at 17 millimeters. Now maybe we don't have to talk about sharpness on this lens in terms of like technical details. Let's talk about in terms of cuts and meat. I mean, the Tamron 1750 in the centers regardless, okay, it's not rib steak, but you know, it's a good sirloin in the centers. But the corners at 50 millimeters, we're talking like a round steak, no flavor, not much you can do. In the corners at 17 millimeter, it's a knuckle soup bone all the way. So when I first saw this lens, I was very excited to play with it because it is a handy focal length, but there have been a few things that have kind of turned me off. I mean, the sunstars aren't amazing, and 17 millimeter performance, you got to be careful there. If you're worried about corners, I would definitely zoom the lens in and avoid those ultra wide angles. You also have to be willing to stop this lens down to get the best optical performance you want, but it is still a very handy, very compact lens, good for video, has some nice characteristics, and frankly, it's a really good price considering this range that you get. I still think this lens could be a fantastic purchase for anybody who's got a Sony E-mount camera, especially if you want to avoid having multiple lenses to cover this exact same range. The only other option that's really out there is the Sony 20 to 70 f4, and it is an optically fantastic lens. I'm a huge fan of the lens and I highly recommend it, and it does a similar thing, I would argue, an even more useful focal range, but it is significantly more expensive. Anyways, I hope this video has helped educate you on whether this lens is right for you. Let us know your comments below. Do please check out the podcast as well. It's on the same channel, or go to all your favorite podcasting apps. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, we'll see you soon with more PetaPixel.